It was astonishing.
So wild to me. The amount we achieved every week was insane.
Can you keep challenging me?
There's lots of things there.
And progress for me is the unfolding of human character.
That's when our classrooms become magical.
Welcome to the No Wasted Days podcast, a show centered solely on helping people improve their self-awareness and self-assurance by sharing skills, stories, and strategies from a diverse range of people that can be easily applied or explored on a day-to-day basis. The mission of No Wasted Days is to unconditionally support people with being alive. The lives we all lead are these incredibly fortuitous things, but that doesn't stop them from becoming very complicated and confusing. As a result, there is nothing that should be more readily available to all of us than spaces that can help us think more clearly and easily about ourselves. With this mission in mind, No Wasted Days is building a bank of information, unique digital tools, and interactive experiences that can help anyone become more self-aware and more self-assured at a cost they completely control. With all of this being true, and without any further ado, today's guests are two amazingly capable performers and teachers, a rare combination who exists in the worlds of classical music and classroom teaching. There could hardly be two better people to explore how the art of learning and performing music can support your self-awareness and self-assurance, whether you consider yourself to be a perfect pianist, a virtuosic violinist, or someone who wouldn't know one end of an oboe from the other. In no particular order, it is my pleasure to introduce Matt and Rachel.
Hi!
Hey.
There we go. Perfect.
Great alliteration as well.
I thought you'd appreciate that. And I'm amazed I got through the word virtuosic without stumbling over it. But yeah, no, all true, importantly as well. So yeah, we will kick off the pod with what is becoming the traditional first question. So I've shared with Matt and Rachel this matrix where on one axis it's from zero self-awareness to full self-awareness, on the other it's from zero self-assurance to complete self-assurance. Where do you think you sit at this moment in time, and how do you think that's evolved over time? Whoever wants to tackle it, feel free to go.
I mean,
first.
I'm happy to go. I think this is a fantastically confronting model, actually, because the two things are so vastly different. My self-assurance is low, I would say, in that I feel incredibly unassured about who I am and what I do. But I think self-awareness, I think, is quite high, and I think that I see that as a constant challenge in my work and in my life to constantly evaluate that and constantly challenge myself to look into the things that I perhaps am not aware of. I don't know if you're aware of this. There's this model about what you know and what you don't know, and what you don't know, you don't know. And it's that kind of like massive, vast what you don't know bit that fascinates me. And and I was having a conversation just yesterday with a friend who has inadvertently become my mentor, and I said, can you keep challenging me, keep telling me when I'm haven't got my feet on the ground, keep challenging me when my awareness has gone to a different place, or I'm not grounded in the stuff that's important, and keeps my eyes open and my ears listening, and my heart open to what I'm doing, especially when we're working with children and colleagues. It's really important to have great self-awareness in order to become not only better at my job, but also be a better colleague, be a better friend. But assurance is a very different one. I feel like I don't know so much about that one. I don't know. What about you, Matt?
Matt, sorry, just so I can cut you off, in bad podcast etiquette form, I think that response from Rachel was fabulously honest and interesting. And I wondered, the thing I scribbled down was like, do you see them as a little bit of a zero-sum game where the more self-aware you become, perhaps the less self-assured you are, or vice versa? Like, do you think self-assurance is really dependent on a lack of self-awareness? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that my vision of self-assurance is clouded by the word ego and is clouded by the word blindness, a certain an arrogance and an unawareness. And I find that really difficult. And I never want to be in a place where I'm self-assured, because I think self-assurance for me, and I'm not saying that this is what the word means, but self-assurance for me means I've stopped learning something. I've stopped being present. I've stopped being inquisitive.
Yeah, and I think that's a cultural trapping that we're going to run into in this kind of mission that No Wasted Days is on. That if you say to 100 people what is self-assurance, they'll come up with some kind of like self-esteem kind of type A, you know, attitude or confidence, or, you know, this braggadociousness, this kind of like masculine weird stuff, versus when actually it should be a far more personal contentment, you know, understanding my frailties and my, you know, my positive qualities and being okay with that. Like this far more kind of contented Zen-like thing versus this kind of weird overconfidence thing.
Yeah, it's an absolute balance to be searched for. And I think, like you said, what happens is your work gets validated, right? And you as a person get validated for doing something well. But then at the same time, the fear for me kicks in, and I get incredibly anxious and worried that I become big-headed, or that my self-assurance comes across as arrogance, or and then I think, oh, I don't want to be one of those people that has no insight into who they are and what they're actually capable of.
That theme as well has come up in the first 2 episodes, this idea of how do you separate yourself from the work or the performance or whatever the aspect is, because it's such a challenge. Because when you receive that positive feedback, those affirmations about your teaching or of your, you know, your concert or your performance or one thing, it's so difficult not to just then stick it in this big bucket of, oh, that's me, they're complimenting me. It's about myself versus just my condition or my performance. And it's a bit of a mental kind of juggling act to try and separate the two. But that will be one of the most essential things or problems I'm trying to solve here from these conversations and from my thinking about the conversations and the tools we create, is that how do you help someone do that? Because that is so critical. It's so possible to give an incredible performance, to accept the praise, but not have this kind of carry over into this weird sense of yourself. But before we run down too many holes, Matt, where do you think your self-assurance and self-awareness is? How do you think it's kind of shaped up and moved?
I was just really settling into you two doing a podcast.
Yeah, welcome to the Rachel podcast.
It's right.
Yeah,
awesome. I'm used to it. It's like every training session. No, I think I'd agree with Rachel on the self-aware thing. Would consider myself fairly self-aware, and I think we need to be pretty self-aware in our job, understanding how our behavior is affecting other people in the room, or, you know, changing the lesson plan as it goes, or, you know, managing your own emotions, that sort of side of things. So I'd say hopefully fairly, you know, medium to high there. And then self-assured, the definition of it matters a whole lot in how you answer the question, right? So do you as this host want people to have their own definition, or would you rather it's your definition that they then answer from, so that you get a similar sort of set of answers? Because
I think for the conversation, I'm happy for people to adopt their own definition, because then we can unpick and unpack how they've come to that definition themselves and how healthy or relevant that really is. You know, so I don't know if your own definition came to mind. Would it say, is it the same Rachel's, like this kind of like very self-absorbed, you know, confidence, or is it a more kind of mindful, content piece like we just discussed in your eyes?
Yeah, I guess it's sort of, for me, is it maybe being confident in your abilities without it tipping over into that arrogance?
No, I was just going to say, I've literally just written down ensuring that assurance is an infinite thing and is never complete. would be satisfying for me, right? So that there's an assurance that gives you a certain amount of confidence in your abilities to deliver something, but is infinite and never stops. And I think that a lot, like a massive problem in politics and education and everything that people and humans do, is that they hit an assurance level, which means they stop listening and they stop being insightful and they stop being inquisitive of the world around them. And then we have a problem. And I think it's that, seeing that and being fearful of becoming that makes me fearful of self-assurance.
Society inculcates us with fear and anxiety. So therefore, when you reach a stage where you can kind of remove it to some degree by having a certain status or role or whatever, then that comes, you don't feel inspired or obligated to learn and grow. When actually, to Rachel's point, you can never be so ensured that you stop being a student. You stop feeling like you can learn and grow, because that's key to a lot of your contentment and joy. And also it's kind of a fallacy. You reach a certain point and then you stop. Well, why ever stop? Because there's always more you can grow. You can always learn something new, or be more wise, be more calm. This is a perennial journey from day one to the last.
Well, Rach, is it your quote? Don't let becoming a teacher stop you being a student.
Oh,
yeah.
Someone,
yeah.
That's social media gold. That is. that's going on a kind of quote tile. I'm sure you've shared this a million times yourself. It's a pretty good quote.
I think it's on a notebook. You got the notebook, Rach. I'm not on any of these notebooks.
Oh, hello. Stop it. Look at this.
Okay.
Immortalized in notebook form.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I stole it, so let's not talk about it too much. But Can I say something that is not meant to be arrogant, but is going to, like, for me, sums this whole thing up? Is that I recently got given an award, for my work in teaching, and it has caused me more anxiety than it has caused me joy. And I'm really I'm thrilled about it, and it's it's great, and it's a great accolade. But I was saying to my mum, it has made me really anxious, because the expectation of me now is slightly different. And I'm worried that I don't live up to the expectation of who I am, possibly, or what people expect me to do or be. And also, I don't want people to think I'm self-assured.
But this is a hugely interesting point. Is what have other people's expectations got to do with anything? You've earned that award presumably on the basis of delivering quality teaching over a long period of time, and that's expectation external. That's just you being a teacher in a moment with kids in a class, or doing whatever you earned the award for. But
it's interesting, isn't it, how much that then claims your
it becomes this is who I am, Rachel so and so, a winner of such award, versus a human being and teacher and music person Rachel. It becomes a label versus anything more useful than that.
Yeah, it makes me want to go, actually, I'd rather have none of it, and then the expectations don't change, and then I don't have to be anything, I don't have to live up to anything, and then I'm just me again. And I would, for example, I would hate to be famous.
Without wanting to turn this into an accidental therapy session, what would you recommend to somebody who is in the same predicament as you? It's like slightly overcome or perturbed by the fact they got this award, and were wondering about what that meant for them in terms of expectations, or their role or whatever. What would you say to that person about how they should deal with that problem?
Just do what you do.
Yeah, exactly. This makes me think of a quote. Like Matt gave me a book, or we were both reading a book at a certain time. That Suzuki book, Matt.
Nurtured by Love.
Yeah, Nurtured by Love. Amazing.
You only read it on the toilet in 5-minute bursts.
Yeah, exactly. But because of my bowels, I got through it quite quickly. Really good book. And something that this Suzuki, Matt, you're the expert on this, so apologies if I'm butchering it, but this Suzuki violin teacher, one of the things he said to a student at one time, who was worrying about kind of expectations or having some performance anxiety, was, it's just you and the chanson, which I think is a bad way of pronouncing French or whatever for song. It's just like, is that right? Good. It's just you and the song. And I think about that constantly, whenever I'm getting a bit caught up, in my kind of career and life with, meetings, or, you got to speak to someone who's got such and such a role, or, you're paid a lot of money to do some work. Every time, every moment you're ever in is just you and the chanson. So it doesn't matter what the expectations are. I need to control my mind and my delivery as best as I can. And the results and the outcome will be what they are. I'm confident enough that they will be, beyond the minimum threshold for what someone's asked for, but it's just you and the chanson every time, and that's sort of what you're saying by just do what you do. It's the same insight, but just delivered differently.
No, and it's really true. And that, by the way, Nurtured by Love, everyone should read that as a staple in everyone's life and reading. But the other thing is that, to say that to myself, okay, just do your job, or Matt, just do our job. We've spoken about this, haven't we, Matt? There's that balance again of not being too self-assured and forgetting who you are, and not forgetting to continue to open your eyes. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that I think, in the first good 5-6 years that I was at, teaching in primary schools, I was confident but not self-assured in terms of the meaning of not very open. It maybe served me fine then, was just cracking on and doing my own thing. But I think Rach, certainly through our conversations in the last 5 years, maybe since COVID even more, just a lot more confident in what I do know, but very aware of what I don't know, and very excited to learn new things.
But that's a really interesting point in and of itself, though, because to what degree is that necessary? If you're trying to push the envelope, push the boundaries of what you're capable of doing in a new setting or in a new way, do you have to kind of affect a certain persona, or a certain confidence, a certain, identity to do something, and then the self-assurance, self-awareness becomes later? Is that, I say that in a little bit of a devil's advocate way, because I'm sure you can avoid doing it, but for most people, isn't that a relatively healthy, sound tactic? Or is,
Yeah, well, as long as it doesn't stop you from doing some, self-critiquing of whether you're actually,
so as long as it doesn't become your norm,
doing a good job,
you stop becoming present.
Well, we live in a pretty terrible time for just everyone getting praise for everything that they do from people that don't know whether something's deserving of praise or not, or just because they want to be seen to be giving people praise publicly on Instagram, on Facebook, everybody liking this, writing underneath things, oh, that was amazing, you're so skilled at this. And when it's not the case, although, people can have their opinions, but that if you're confident but not self-assured or self-aware, then you might take all that praise and just go, I'm smashing it, and might not be doing a good job, and the people who gave you praise weren't remotely interested in whether you were actually doing a good job, or the effects of that sort of fake praise. So I think it's really complicated these days. So you really do need people around you that you can trust to have those more serious discussions where you're honest with each other and be like, I was really rubbish at this today, and they go, yeah, I was rubbish yesterday, tomorrow's a different day, have you seen this, have you read this, or this teaching activity worked for me today, or it's worked all week, and why don't you give it a try? And that certainly wasn't doing that for the first few years.
Well, it's another classic bind where people aren't great as a rule at interrogating the outcomes of their jobs or lives or whatever, because they're always inherently quite complex, But if you're not very good at doing it, or you're not self-assured enough to concede that there might have been some component that wasn't perfect, you'll just, you'll feed in all of those social media comments that you were great, and you'll use this to perpetuate some kind of sense of yourself, when actually every time you've delivered an outcome, there's things that you've controlled well, there's things that you've controlled badly, there was things external that affected it badly, and there was things external that affected it positively. That's true every single time, but we rarely apply that kind of framework, as individuals, or have the prescience and wisdom of other people to apply it on our behalf. It's usually quickly labeling whether something was good or bad. At best, a few kind of ad hoc, little recommendations, and then that's kind of it. And even that doesn't happen a lot of the time when things have gone well. When things go well, you can be presented with certain problems, a bit like your award, Rachel. You could probably have done with breaking down the kind of, okay, I've won this award. What is this outcome? How do I put it into those buckets? Even though on a superficial level, it's a big tick and a success, when actually it's presented a few challenges.
Rich, all that you're saying in terms of, self-reflection and insight after doing something and asking those questions, I think for me and Matt, forgive me if I'm wrong, Matt, here, but we are, the issues of self-assurance and self-reflection and insight and all of those things, we are inevitably impacting and having an effect on children. And that's where those particular topics become like, this isn't just about me or Matt, this is about the entire community that we're working within. So the impact of our self-assurance, impact of our self-reflection is massive. And we are modeling, we are trying to model what it is to be a decent human being to the young people we're working with. And therefore it's a really serious thing. And I think we, in our careers, and in our workspace, it might be something that we do more than others do because of the responsibility that we both take incredibly seriously. Because at the end of the day, if my self-assurance is so much that I stop looking, the children miss out. And then that is where I just draw a line. And I know Matt draws a line, because actually it's not about me or him, it's about the kids. So that's why this is massive.
Yeah, I wrote that down as a kind of like, Matt and Rachel specific question. So how much of your role as teachers do you think is about making the children self-assured or self-aware? Is that actually a more macro, larger priority than the violin piece? Or would you see self-assurance and self-awareness as perhaps the key condition to being a great learner, and therefore instilling that into the kids is paramount? Do you at all think of your role in that way?
I guess it's different with different age groups. There's lots of things there that maybe feed into self-assurance, self-awareness, resilience, understanding sort of longer term gratification and discipline and good listening skills, and, but also working with community and empathy with other people in the room. So there's a lot of things in there that will feed into all of that stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily package it as we're focused on
doing that.
But
but as Rachel said, perhaps the key mode through which to do that isn't what you say or any part of the lesson plan. It's just what you demonstrate as a human being.
I would say for sure that music for me certainly is secondary in what I'm trying to do. Like, I really do talk on a regular basis about, music is the vehicle in order to unfold the human beings in front of me, right? It's just the thing. It's not teaching them the next piece is not really my job as such. It's about teaching them aspects of resilience and empathy and all of those things that are involved in music making and music teaching, that are ultimately going to give them self-assurance and insight and all of those things, which of course are going to be more important for the world we're living in. And that philosophy of reflection and insight that me and Matt certainly really hold on to as colleagues. And I rely on Matt massively in my job to keep that conversation going. And I think, when you're talking about tools to enhance those aspects we're talking about, it's the idea of reminding and being grounded in a philosophy that you believe in and you rely on and you really trust in. It's witnessing people live and breathe that philosophy beyond yourself. It's the use of questions constantly. Like the use of questions in our work is, and for ourselves and with each other, is a huge part of what we do. And staying connected with your colleagues is massive, so that we never become like me and Matt constantly say, God, that lesson was rubbish, that didn't work, and I'll say, God, I had this really tricky moment in my lesson today, how would you have dealt with that? Do you have any ideas? Do you know the background of this student? Can you help me understand better how to deal with this? Those conversations are happening constantly.
Yeah.
And we always joke, but me and Matt have scheduled lunch breaks together in our timetable. And it is probably the most impactful moment in the week, because it's that kind of self-reflection, chatting, sharing, questioning, that is the gold dust for teachers, really. And I don't take that lightly. That's hugely important for me.
Yeah.
And
go on, Matt, sorry, did you have something?
Yeah, well, and we do it with the wider team as well, and it's fascinating, isn't it, Rach, just to have that time with those people, and I think it means a great deal to them as well, especially for some who've like just joined the team, to come in and see the way that we're talking about things over lunch and how seriously we take it, but how kind we are to each other about letting go of bad lessons and resetting for the next day. And it's super important.
Yeah, and the questions, the continual improvement, please. There was so much about those two comments which are fascinating. The one I want to touch on is the idea that of just how rare it is, perhaps in society, to speak to people that would prioritize something that wasn't really obviously the main goal. You ask anybody what a music teacher is built to do, they're going to say it's something about teaching the music. They're not going to say there's this a kind of high level kind of primary goal, which actually is the thing that if you get moving, the apparently primary goal is achieved more successfully or more holistically. That's so rare. And Matt, this is a reference that you might appreciate. I think I listened to a talk last year or so by a restaurateur called Danny Meyer, who has a series of famous Shake Shack, but a load of other kind of good restaurants as well. And I'm going to butcher what he said, but he put the values and the well-being of the staff as his primary thing, when actually, it's a similar dynamic. You'd think a restaurateur would be obsessed solely about the food, but he knows that for the environment he wants to create, how those people feel and how they act is the key condition to success. The food will kind of come together and happen. You can focus on that very, minutely and specifically as well. But there is no condition greater than the well-being and, a communication ability and the collaboration of the staff. And it's the same dynamic. But this is rare. This is sadly rare, because most leaders in most spaces are obsessed by measurable goals, certain economic objectives, when actually you can succeed on those grounds, but also you can fail dramatically on those grounds. You can fail people by just focusing on those grounds, when actually you shouldn't have to. You should never have to fail people. This is the whole
problem in society, is that people are information obsessed, but they're not personality curious. So, people will say to me all the freaking time, how do you teach shifting? How do you teach vibrato? And I'm like, that is not your problem. Like, the information in itself, sure, we all need a certain amount of information, but focus more on who you are, focus on more of your delivery, focus on the environment that you're creating for the students that walk into your room, focus on nurture, focus on the loving place to learn, and then everything happens. Everything is easy. What I'm doing is not magical. What Matt is doing is not magical. It's just, I'm hoping that we work so hard on creating space for children to learn that it just happens. And it's not because me and Matt have any golden nuggets of wisdom to offer. It's just that we've created
or you've said any words in a particular order that if only somebody said those words in the same order, it would come across in the same way. It's it's the environment you create. And I think there's a lack of awareness of that. In my quote unquote career, for example, you see a million instances of people who are technically capable being promoted to roles that are more senior, when actually, yes, you need some technical ability to be able to advise and guide someone. But there are a million soft or emotional skills which are far more contingent on creating the environment that's conducive to success, that have nothing to do with technical ability at all. And, you know, again, that's a problem. Technical ability, objectives, you know, numerical objectives, lovely and easy to measure, whereas someone's capacity to create that, you know, nurturing environment, very hard to measure. And even harder to prioritize if you were the person promoted on the technical level, because you're just going to self-select. You're going to go, oh, who's the next most technically able person than me? Oh, it's that person. You're not going to, reward those ultimately far more valuable skills.
Well, I mean, the music performer world is very tricky for those reasons as well, right? From a scary young age, which is why things like exams come in, and auditions, and things that we as teachers all have to sort of get involved with, because it's just the structure that we live in. And it's very hard to sort of rip that up without something in its place. But the alternative is very hard to, as you say, show with data all the skills that these people have beyond a score in a music exam.
Yeah.
Which, as Rach and I know, depends on who marked it, and one year's set of results completely can't be compared to the year before because of the quality of the marking. So they're not very useful. Maybe the journey to taking the exam is useful, but the result is often just totally random.
Yeah, well, it's sometimes mistaking, just getting the end wrong. You know, there's nothing wrong with having an examination program or a kind of scoring criteria of what perhaps represents a successful, playing of a piece. But if that is the ultimate end of everything, then it's going to be relatively either destructive on a mental health basis or just shallow as an output. And, Mary and Maya touched upon this because they're both in the singing and performance space. And that fixation on the output, yes, ultimately there's 5% of those people that have gone through that whole thing, who have contented careers or continue to enjoy music, but also you kill the enthusiasm and energy of people's music practice by making it so fixated on that one thing. And that seems to me, you must see that all the time to some degree. These precocious kids you might meet when they're 6, that have then had all of the joy of music batted out of them by 16, despite obviously your two's best intervention and steering, just because this fixation on exam.
I mean, I hope that Rach and I don't do that very much.
No, I was saying you're the antidote to that, obviously.
But I think I'm quite sad more when I meet people our age, and you chat to them about, did you ever play an instrument? And they go, oh, I got to grade 7, but I wasn't very good. And you're like, if you took a grade 7 exam, you must have spent years of your life playing this instrument. Like, that's not done in a year sort of thing. That's hours, decade probably. And they seem to have no emotional connection, other than like, oh, I was never very good. I just did it when I was a kid. Yeah. Like, that's so wild to me that people spent that amount of time doing something music, which is really meant to be pretty fun, and have come away with it with that feeling that they're like, no, I don't play anymore. I was never very good, but I did grade 8.
But it's again, like we were saying, it's that issue of the focus being on outcome and not process. And I'm literally in the middle of writing a talk as we speak. I'm writing a talk and I woke up in the middle of the night. I know when I've had a rest, okay, because I wake up at 3 a.m. and I start writing things, okay? So this happened 2 nights ago. And at 3 a.m. I wrote, blind to authentic, meaningful progress. For me, that is a massive problem in city life, right? When you live in a competitive city and parents and guardians are driven to get their child into the next big school, the next, the thing that effectively shows progress. Now, people can't see this, but I'm doing inverted commas, progress, because progress for people is different. And progress for me is the unfolding of human character, is the unfolding of all of those magical and so important things that then just help create a wonderful musician. Like, you don't need to think about an exam when those are your focus, right? So I'm trying to, but that's what I'm saying. My responsibility is to try and challenge and change that narrative. Is that what is progress? What does progress look like? Well, progress for me and what is important is this, and this. Then the musical, fluidity and the musical standard just comes from that, is born of that.
There's something that comes to mind is on that general point, and I think it's really wise that you've said that. There's a famous football manager from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s called Brian Clough. He managed Nottingham Forest, Derby, and probably another team that I'm about to forget. But when Nottingham Forest won the European Cup, it was only then it had dawned on him that that was their focus and that they'd done that. He was so absorbed in creating the environment and instilling the processes that were conditions to doing that. It was only when they won he realized that was what they were doing all the time. And I think people forget that's the case. There's so many routes to improving someone's condition through good process or a playful mindset or having fun. And the condition will happen that, as a result of that process and fun. What do you think stops people from taking that slightly more holistic mentality?
I mean, because they think baked into society, isn't it? The career.
But also people are in a hurry. People want it now. They don't want it tomorrow. They want it right now. And they have no idea, other than what they know, like the indoctrination of society, of how to get something. And it's like, I can buy this and I can get it today. And they fail to look at the fact that actually the more time spent at the beginning doing something properly will escalate and speed up the process in the end of the day. I'm reading this wonderful book about wonder, right? And I talk about it all the time. It's about wonder and how we can stop this can't remember what she calls it, hyper education, right? Hyper education is this superficial, like speeding and pushing children through process with, the idea of getting something at the end, rather than letting them letting them wonder and letting them contemplate and letting them explore something properly and enjoying it at the expense of just achieving something superficially. I don't think people properly understand the damage that's being done by doing that.
Yes, I completely agree. And Sam mentioned this whole thing in the first podcast as well, and I think enough people understand it, that, a relaxed mindset, a playful mindset is actually an ultimately more conducive condition for performance than this kind of tense, superficial, apparently objective orientated, thing. But, if you're stressed and fatigued and have some pressure on you from somebody else, you're going to want to put out superficially that your one focus is the target that everybody has in mind. You don't have the space to entertain that there's a slightly better, albeit indirect, route of achieving that, and the cost to people, again, back to this kind of idea, is too high, because teachers become anxious, students become anxious, and this just has a waterfall, people passing their anxiety and stress onto one another. And then you get epidemics of, stress and depression and anxiety where we're at right now.
Oh, I was going to say, I think there's also these sort of rushing through education or other things you're saying, Rach. There are these deadlines set of 18 is your A levels, and you're probably done university by 21, and then stop learning, or like it seems framed that way when you're a young person, right? You're like, now I'm an adult, and then I go into the world, and if age 16 to 21 weren't your best learning years, you're screwed. And for me, some of those years I was in a really good space to learn, and others I wasn't. And actually, some of my best learning probably would have happened in my late 20s if it was more normal to put study in different points of your life. I suddenly came to photography much later and might have wanted to do that more professionally, a proper course on it, or retake a language, or all this sort of stuff. that we are sort of meant to be pretty finished by 21, and that's when people then go into the job world with not self-assurance but sort of fake, they're pretending to be arrogant or pretending to be confident so that they can dive into these scary worlds with career paths and everything. But who's to say that anyone's ready at that point?
You're right. And also there's like too much noise in the world. There's too much noise. So it's like, there's not enough quiet space. And I'm talking metaphorically, there's not enough quiet for us to sit back and just be present in what we're doing as it is, let alone decide how to be better or how to maybe go, like Matt said, go and do something that he's interested in, because the noise is too much. And I think guardians and parents are doing this with children, right? They're saying, a parent said to me recently, right, my child is 3, so what do you think they should do? And my response was, I don't think they should do anything. They should do what they want to do, not what you or I want them to do, what they want to do. Like, why are you making these decisions for them? They're so young. Like, how are you going to sustain engagement if they don't want to do it? So it's mad.
And that conversation seems to me to start because of a couple of the things we've already mentioned. That parent, is so scared by the idea that their child isn't, by the time they hit 21, kind of functioning, safe and secure. And also that they are perhaps wanting to overcompensate for a lack of self-assurance and self-awareness on their own basis. So, which apparently the magic golden bullet of that is if your child is successful, so therefore you're going to have weird conversations with music teachers when they're 3 that are kind of like outcome or, obsessed with a certain set of activities versus letting that child play, use their imagination, some proper conditions for being a creative, satisfied, contented person.
I guess it's complicated for me and Rach because we do see guardians that support their kids a hell of a lot on their music journey, but they aren't necessarily giving their kids a lot of freedom to do anything else. And it's, they can come across as, or they are being wonderful parents or guardians, and we love that they're putting so much time and effort into the thing that we are, asking them to do. And we're like, look at this level of dedication, it's amazing. But at the same time, are the kids really having a say in any of it? Do they know what the other options are? So it's complicated.
Yeah, but you must see that constantly. You probably, between the two of you, have a really interesting take on what that perfect balance is, because it's not devolvable responsibility for decision making to children, but it's not keep them in such tight train tracks and straitjackets and with such expectations that there's only one route or solution.
Routine, boundaries, and choice. It has to be boundaried. And I think that's a big problem in society now, is that people forget that freedom doesn't mean freedom without boundaries. Like, you can give children choice, but children like boundaries. Children like to know where they are at. Children like to know what's expected of them, not freedom to just fail or freedom to just guess. That's not what they like. They like to know what's going on. And I think parenting, look, I'm not a parent, so, I'm just speaking from the experiences I've had with the guardians and things that I've worked with and, my own parents. But I think it's the same in teaching. Much of what me and Matt do is a bit like parenting. We're giving children boundaries, clear boundaries, but space and freedom to succeed and experiment. And for me, that those things are what makes something successful, and successful in all areas of life. Freedom within boundaries. It's like jazz music. Jazz music only works because there are boundaries and rules, and then there's this magnificent freedom that comes from that. But it doesn't work if you can just do anything and you don't have any of the bottom, the foundational skills.
Anything more to touch on with that thought, Matt? Was that accurate?
What you covered it.
No, but It is
Rach covered,
fascinating.
oh, boring.
No,
But
it's good. But like, just to follow up on that point, because I'm conscious that you two have seen a lot of kids progress in a very formative parts of their life and still have some touch points with these kids now on very kind of, oh, Matt might have frozen, on a kind of infrequent basis. So you may have seen the kind of manifestations of, you know, one parenting tactic versus another. Does any kind of examples come to mind where you can see, you know, that, you know, the benefits and the fruits of one particularly good choice?
for sure. Yeah, I mean, can I give you one example recently?
Yes.
So I recently, you know, put a lot of children through for exams, and you know, there were those parents that were really pushing for the exam, right? And it was all about getting the exam to apply for the scholarship. And there were those parents and guardians that were doing it because the child said, I'd really like to do that. I'd really like to have a go at that, mum or dad or guardian. I'd really like to have a go. And the guardian had said to me, I don't mind what they do. Like, I really don't mind. But if that's what they want to do, do you mind if we do it? And I'm like, of course, that's great. You know, if they want to do it, I want to encourage that and nurture that. It was astonishing. I mean, astonishing to watch that play, right? And that whole term I've just done is the basis of the talk I'm writing at the moment, right? So they record the exams. One ends up crying, the other one ends up coming out smiling and jumping around and saying she just had the best time doing it. The one that was jumping around having the best time came out with the highest score. Yeah. And the mum was just like, whatever, don't mind, don't care what happens, like, whatever. And the other one was like, the other one said some extraordinary things. A few parents said extraordinary things to me, you know, and I wish I could say exactly what was said, but I can't because but it was really interesting to me that when it's the parents or guardian driving the goal and driving what the child is doing, I find it catastrophic. Yeah. That's what I would say. And ultimately it doesn't work.
It's difficult, isn't it? Obviously there's a lot of anxiety and stress for them because they might have a little more knowledge on the subject of the exam, or either correct or false understanding of how important the result is to their child's future, and that, you know, heightens their anxiety and all that stuff. And or maybe they did it when they were a child and they're just carrying that anxiety on. So it's a lot to unpick, but it certainly works best if you can be that guardian that is a lot more chilled about it and be the cheerleader rather than, you know, the internet doctor that's got their own theories.
Well, the person who jumps to mind, Matt, is you know, Jacob Collier's mum. You know, we watched the Imagine documentary. You know, she had all the knowledge in the world to kind of impose her ideas on him, but it seems like what she was great at doing was creating the space and the curiosity and the interest, which then led to his own want of, you know, that kid who wanted to do the exam that Rachel's mentioned. He just wanted to test and learn and play on his Mac software that he was given at the time. And where he is now in terms of musical theory and knowledge and skill, you can't get to by just being shoved through some exams. You can't do that. You know, it's a different level of ability and also a different level of awareness. You know, the things that he has to say about, you know, being empathetic to other people or the music process or the value of music. Again, you know, you're not getting the average ultra successful kind of Guildhall whatever person saying the same stuff. You know, it just doesn't happen, you know. So it's like, that's kind of the perfect example.
That's so brilliant, and swings back to the whole issue of self-assurance, because the bottom line is that the guardian or parent needs to have a level of self-assurance about stepping back and saying, I'm gonna let them just explore and experiment and see what they want to do. And so for Susie's wonderful, like, what a wonderful person and character, and she's so nurturing to everyone around her, and, you know, it is exactly the human you would expect her to be. She's kind, she's wonderful, and it comes as no surprise that Jacob has made such a career for himself, because she clearly created an environment where he felt like he wasn't being judged by her and wasn't being, torn apart every time he tried something, but rather, like Matt said, I love the word cheerleader. Like, that's what we're trying to get everyone around our students to be, is their cheerleader, not the judge. We do that work. We try and make it better. That's not what the parent or guardian should be doing. It's that it should be cheerleading. And if anyone is listening to this podcast that is a guardian or parent and wants to do the best for their child, all I can say is be your child's cheerleader. Don't do anything else. Like, that is your job. Yeah, it's true, because every child that we've ever taught, the first thing they do when they do something is they look behind them for some kind of validation, for some kind of, did I do okay? And if someone goes,
if you've got the brain space, be a cheerleader for the other people in the room as well.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, but
I think that's when our classrooms become magical, is when the guardians who are there start supporting the children that they aren't related to or aren't there to look after. That's when the whole classroom shifts. A feeling shifts, and the whole momentum. Suddenly, anything's possible. It's Leicester City Football Club suddenly, and you've hacked the system, and they'll do whatever you want because they've got all these people behind them, just like going, yeah, keep going that way. No, yeah.
But these are fabulous rules for, whether you're a guardian of a child or not, whether if you're a team manager in any business anywhere, positive feedback, asking a really good question and inspiring people with external stuff. You do those things every day, you're going to have self-assured, self-aware, highly capable, highly motivated people, and how simple is that? It's simple to say, and it's ultimately simple to do. The condition that it lacks often is that person's own self-awareness and self-assurance. Because if you're not self-aware or self-assured, or if you haven't had, that demonstrated to you, the chance of you doing it goes down, despite how deceptively powerful and simple it is.
I think there's self-awareness sort of wrapped up in whether you are good at surrounding yourself with those people, or start to make a point of spending more time with those people. If you're being aware of relationships you have with people that are possibly more negative and draining, and they may be super important to your life, but you may want to surround yourself with more people that help pushing you in the right direction, or ask you the right questions, or an accountability person. And when you're doing exercise or trying to eat more healthily or reach some career goal or whatever it is, so that I think
it's about discipline,
self-awareness.
Yeah, you need to be disciplined in self-awareness and disciplined in self-assurance and all of those things.
I just wrote the term kind of self-investment, because I think that is something that is also kind of extricated out of lots of educational processes or parent kind of child relationships, when actually it's so unbelievably essential for people's later self-assurance and self-awareness. On NoWastedDays.io, the pioneering digital journal that you could use alongside this podcast, I try and give enough space to people's own sets of ideas and thoughts. It's not just my brain, my way of doing it laid down on a page. We've got this kind of year map where you can input your own values, your own reason for being, your own vision, your own quotes. I see that page as arguably the most essential, because then you've created it, you've mapped out this landscape which is distinctly your own, and you're investing in things that are key and very important to yourself, not just important or relevant to somebody else. And if I had taken that out of the app, I don't think in time it would ultimately serve its true purpose or be anywhere near as good.
Yeah, I think without that, it has more danger of being a sort of not efficiency, a productivity planner.
Which it's not.
To do tasks, but not think a bit bigger picture.
Yeah, because because it's not about being a tool to being more productive, as if everybody is not as happy as they could be because they're not doing as much. Often the opposite is true. You're trying to fixate and believe that the doing will solve all your problems, when actually, as Rachel touched on earlier as well, some silence, some presence, some awareness, these are routes to your greater happiness and contentment, far more than just trying to do more. But like, I'm not really sure I've got the perfect end to all of these thoughts, but how do you think people best instill or create a sense of self-investment in other people? Because it's so easy for teachers just to kind of inculcate their ideas, or say you should do this for X reason, and not just inspire people's own sense of curiosity and investment in whatever there is that they're trying to do.
I would have said it's all about metacognition and allowing children to work out their own process and why they're doing what they're doing, without telling them why or how or what. So it's inspiring and being a catalyst for journeying with them, and getting them to use all of their senses to understand something for themselves, and not me telling them this is what it is. Again, it's a process.
And I think that is basically at the heart of it. It's important to me, I think, on this route to try and help people be more self-assured and self-aware, that most people understand that having your own reason or deciding what life means to you is a key kind of condition to then moving through it with more purpose, more energy, more joy, versus saying, oh, okay, well, it either doesn't have a meaning, or the meaning is obviously this kind of like capitalist economic piece. Empowering people to think, well, what does my time mean to me? What does my life mean to me? What do my relationships mean to me? If people have an answer for those questions, I think that ladders up to them moving through life with more joy and more purpose, because they've sort of created the landscape and the lens with which they view things, versus devolving to somebody else's frame. So as someone that's trying to create a platform and a tool to help people, I want to give them enough of a skeleton, enough opportunity for discipline, but not deprive them of a sense of self-investment in what's going on. It's a funny little balance.
It's a really weird balance. And I think that, like, as a woman in my mid-30s that is single and childless, my view on wanting those things is so skewed by society's views on what I should be doing, that I said to my mum last week, I said, I don't know what I want. I don't know what it is that I want. Actually, do I want children? Do I want to get married? Or am I so indoctrinated that I've got lost with that? And I think that what you're saying is kind of that. It's allowing people to sit back and go, oh, that's what I want. It's what I thought I wanted is actually not what I wanted. It's what society wanted for me.
Well, like, but this came up in the first podcast, that degree of objectivity about your own needs and desires and joys is really, really hard to come by. If you're just using your brain and your eyes and your ears, like I gave this example in the first podcast, that left to my own devices, I would constantly try and cram each day full of like a million things, like this perfect kind of web of different actions and activities. That's what I would do left to my own devices. But having used this journal thing for 800 odd days, I've seen too many instances where on a day all I've done is go for a walk with my girlfriend, have an ice cream, and you get your top feeling score for that. So therefore I know that some days just have to be focused on that level of clarity and simplicity. My brain alone would never let me do that. But I've seen it too many times now, this little bit of instant replay that ladders up to a joyful day, and that's, why I think some of the tool can be valuable, but also that's a battle that everybody faces. What are my joys? What are my wants and needs and desires versus that of the weird values that society has kind of obligated me with?
Do you have to plan that, Rich? Do you write do nothing, do nothing, do nothing, do nothing, do nothing?
No, well, I would just write be present with my pet name for Mara is Beauty, so be present with Beauty, and that's the only mission of a day,
so like, cute. Cute. I know COVID was like an horrific time for so many people, but if I'm honest, it was one of the most revealing and magical times for me personally. And I know you guys had a wicked lockdown, because it forced me into a life that I never would have allowed myself to do at this point in my career. It forced me into being present and living in the countryside and walking every day and waking up late, and because that was the life, right? And being forced into that, really opened my eyes to contentment on a totally different level. Like you're saying, Rich, it was shocking to me how content I was with living like that.
We were given society.
Oh, Matt, you're
green light.
I can't hear you for some reason.
I can hear him.
Oh no, sorry, that was just my laptop deciding volume didn't matter. We're back. We're back online.
Yeah, I mean, it was a monumental shift in how society functioned, and we were given the green light to not have a commute and still be trusted to get on with our jobs without repercussions, because there was no other option. And it turned out, guess what? Everything was fine in terms of work getting done. And it did allow so much more time for getting healthier routines and reading and sitting in fresh air and cooking your own food, and I think, and then investing in friendships that mattered to you as well. And I think, Rach, that's when we started being more reflective on teaching with each other, was over lockdown, because we would have, and Rich, you probably remember that me and Rach would talk on the phone a lot in that time, because the teaching was a bit weird and a bit hard, but also we became a bit fascinated with it and discussing how it was going. And I think after that, we've continued that in person. These summer holidays that we have as teachers, we often fill it with other work as well, but often having a week where I'm not even on holiday, or I'm just in the house resetting and fitting in more, like I was able to in those times during COVID, is super important. And
well, as a mindset shift from society, but also as an opportunity to live differently, like it's some kind of Instagram kind of witticism or like wisdom, but it's like you see different videos of people going, well, I wasn't actually depressed or anxious, I just hadn't been out in the sun, or I hadn't been for a walk, or I hadn't taken a deep breath. The line between feeling pretty miserable and feeling pretty lovely is so, like, people strafe this boundary so closely, and as Rachel said, it can be the difference between having gone for a walk in the morning and felt the sun on your face. That one decision can change everything.
I'm feeling a bit anxious now. I feel like I need to sell my flat in London and move to the countryside. Like, I'm getting that all of a sudden, like, I've made the wrong decision. Why have I bought a flat in London? But it is interesting, and it's well, we could get into all sorts of topics now on depression and anxiety, but it is massively intriguing to me that time I felt my least depressed and anxious, and my time wasn't filled with stuff. I was very present, and I was very calm, and I was very quiet, which was really fascinating to me. But I don't really want to live with my mum for the rest of my life, even though I love her dearly. I don't think also drinking Prosecco at 5 o'clock every day is something that should be, I don't know.
I don't know. Test it. Use your yeah, exactly. Use your No Wasted Days journal. I'll have to obligate you to sign up to it and just stick it in every day. Because if your joy really relates to a couple of glasses of Prosecco every afternoon, then who am I to say that you shouldn't do that?
Yeah, as long as you're not teaching afterwards. It gave us a lot more time, Rich, didn't it, to to create community with our neighbors and everything. And it's amazing how now I'm back to the real life of getting on the bus and every day and traveling and blah blah blah, that those relationships, whilst they're still very strong because of the COVID time, we're back to very infrequent hangouts with the neighbors, because everybody's doing more things, it's just become less of a priority again. It's quite sad in a way.
Yeah, and it's you say it in objective terms. No wonder it was so good for us. We were able to create a loving local community. We were able to spend so much time with people that we loved, i.e. each other. We were able to invest more in creative projects and ideas, and have less weird kind of economic expectations or job things. So no wonder it was good, despite all of the negatives and the weirdness and whatever. It tells you that those 3 or 4 conditions are very, very important.
The amount we achieved every week was insane. We were actually doing a lot more stuff.
Like I'm not sat here today, albeit with, I'm not saying what I'm doing is successful, but I don't get from a point where I have no coding or software ability to having built a fully functioning web application which is designed to help people feel more self-assured and self-aware without that time to just incubate. Like, I think I did a data science course during the lockdown, some other stuff that really I would have been starved of the time of doing, and would have not necessarily prioritized in my spare time to the same degree had it not been for that moment, despite the fact that that was going to allow me to be more authentically myself and more creative and happier. I would have found a way to suffocate that, opportunity.
But taking the time or having that freedom is not an option for everybody, and certainly not a financial option for everybody. So it's not necessary. Can't necessarily be advice, can it?
No, the advice isn't you have that much time, but it's probably to you have to we've come to this in every podcast as well. Prioritize pleasure. Know what brings you joy and prioritize it, because your boss isn't necessarily going to help you do that, or even sometimes your relationships and friendships are going to make it difficult to do that. But it's essential for your own sense of well-being and purpose and progress to just find that, know what your joys are and prioritize them. That's essential.
On No Wasted Days, there's a thing of finding a little process for sort of helping to write your values out, right?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Do you have processes or reading recommendations for how to really know what your joy is? Because a lot of it is other people's joy, or maybe you get joy from other people's joy, but that's quite complicated. And I certainly have loads of really wonderful friends who are not in the music world at all. Basically all of my close friends outside of work are not musicians, and it means that I don't end up doing a lot of music outside of life, and that hit me a lot later maybe than I should have thought about it, that really I wanted to have more music again in my life with friends, but me, joy was hanging out and going to the pub and having nice friends, but I hadn't really thought about it in terms of joy specific to me.
Yeah, my thought at the moment is that if you can articulate your vision and your values, and I'm creating a process for helping people think about their reason for being. If you've got those 3 things, hopefully you'll map those into your daily kind of plan with more clarity. But also, obviously, in the insights page on No Wasted Days, you get to see how much of what you did when you said you were going to do something that you actually did, or how you felt when you had certain types of days. So you can use that as a way of kind of interrogating, okay, well, I really thought on that day I was going to do X, and I found a way to not do it at all. What does that say about what it means to me, versus other things where I have said I was going to do it and done it, or conversely, things that I've not said I was going to do but ended up doing anyway. What does this actually say about how you enjoy relative different things?
I mean, maybe there could be at some point things where each task has its own joy score as well, of each moment that you completed to some certain level, did that bring you any joy? And it might be, no, it was just a task that I needed to do, and doing it relieved me of stress or anxiety or something. But
Yeah, well, the thing I'm trying to obsess over, what is the minimum viable dose of data or kind of, intervention to help people just use their brains more clearly. I'm reluctant to try and flood the thing with loads of extra data inputs that, require more of somebody, or more kind of like aggregated kind of AI machine learning recommendations. Because I think our brains are just like phenomenal tools for thinking creatively and aggregating our memories and remembering how we felt. We just need to give them a bit more support in the doing of that, and I think the format I've created to this point, plus or minus perhaps a few, critically some experiences, but maybe a few data points here or there, or some different questions here or there, are like fertile ground. They are the environment that somebody needs to help think more easily about themselves. Arguably the most important bit is the memories I want to capture from today are, because if you just jot down those 5 or 6 things, whatever they are, a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, when you come to look at them in 6 months hence, you remember far more about that day than just what you've written down. That information you're accessing is sat in the back of your brain somewhere, even if it can't access it on a daily basis. It takes the little prompt and the feeling about how one day actually felt, exactly to make you think about what brings you joy. It's a slightly kind of longer route to that, to the idea of learning what your joy is, but it's a powerful one, because once you've, again, back to self-investment, once you've gone through that loop of seeing the signals, thinking for yourself, having some observations, and then testing them, because you go, actually, I think that's what brings me joy. And then you plot it into a future day and you see it either really does or really doesn't. And you're like, oh, okay, you're on this constant, nice little happy feedback cycle with yourself. And I think that's the route that's been true of my experience. I can't say that will be true of every user or whatever, but that seems to be how it works for me.
It's a really interesting one. I think that I think I've been living very much like here and then here and then here, then here. And it's like, I'm going to block out a week's holiday and that will be my pure joy. And actually, it just doesn't work like that, does it? Because you block it out, and then I spend like 3 days being depressed and overwhelmed and tired and having breakdowns for 3 days because I'm so tired, and then start to enjoy having some time off, but then I start feeling lazy, and then I'm back at work. And but equally, it's about it's about reminding people that it's okay to find joy and fulfillment in your job. And I think especially when we are doing something very vocational, that joy doesn't need to be a disassociation with that. Like Matt was saying, like music making, I think sometimes can feel like, oh, that's part of my job, but actually making music with friends is not our job. We can do that, and it can be. And I was just thinking, oh, Matt, I need to come over to yours. I'm going to play some duets. But there's something really powerful in the acknowledgement of, I can find joy. Like after this, I need to write a talk, and I will sit down and I will enjoy doing it because I feel rested and I find joy in investigating without the pressure. I'm not writing a talk for anything specific other than I know that I'm going to concoct some stuff, right? So I will just deliver some new things. But I think there's a little bit of what's the word? I think people try and separate the two too much, right? It's like, this is work and this is play, but actually the two can be entwined.
No, I completely agree. Like, we definitely all have joys that are distinct to us or particular interests, but the idea that everything else can't be inherently joyful, playful, mindful, is a unnecessary kind of delineation to make. But what do we get told so much of the time? It's like, work hard, play hard, like they're two different things. Or some kind of axiom where work is of one importance, play is of a different kind, and they're not the same, when actually I find it super powerful to see everything as play. Whether it's a reporting output in my job, or a presentation, or this, or everything's playful. Everything I just need to do mindfully and playfully. And whether it's the washing up or this or anything else, I'm going to get maximum joy from it that I possibly can.
Can I put in your brain, please? I'd like that. I need to
Well, you should see my little feelings score on my No Wasted Days is like very consistent. And I've always been fascinated by, talking to users where perhaps it was a little bit more kind of like peaks and troughs, whereas mine is kind of weirdly kind of like the variance is so small, every day more or less. Like we've had a few tough days recently traveling, like we've tried to adopt a dog and it's been difficult for one reason or another to do, and it's like, but still, if you attack even those issues playfully, mindfully, calmly, your chance of feeling pretty good as best you can is still pretty good. It's never going to be quite like these certain peak moments or days or joys or relationships or whatever, but you're going to get maximum joy and calmness and stuff that was there.
Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. And I think that finding joy but it's a mindset thing. It's a mindset. Yeah. And me and Matt really challenge each other on this in our jobs, and I'll start complaining about something and Matt will just be like, remember that, remember this, Rachel, remember that. And we started having this in-joke that we decided that if one of us would text a complaint to the other, we would text the word wine as a reminder that, don't whine, but also drink wine. But, let's celebrate the good stuff rather than just talk about the negative. And I think we've really changed that, haven't we, in our team, and started to celebrate way more what's going well, as opposed to constantly commenting and getting, stuck in the stuff that isn't working. And it's made the job lighter and easier, I think.
Yeah, and no wonder, because if you, or at least in my own life, anything that I find myself about to go, complain, whining about something, I try and as quickly as possible, and obviously sometimes that time is this small, sometimes it's that large, see it as actually it's just an opportunity for more play, for more exploration, for more growth, and it's these things come thick and fast, A, when you're traveling, and B, when you're trying to build a platform with a podcast and other stuff, because you share things often and they don't reach that many people, but I'm far better off going, okay, well, why did that not work very well, or how can I make this better? This is a playful growth mindset versus a go, for God's sake, why is nobody watching and listening to my clearly saged wisdom? Which is going to ladder up to a better performance and success and more happiness to me? Well, it's pretty obvious. That and the old glass of wine obviously is it's perfect combo.
I think and everybody's maybe capable of that playful mindset at times, but maintaining it requires people around you that with a similar approach, or that you've asked them to back you up in those things. They don't even necessarily need to do it themselves the whole time, but you aren't necessarily going to be strong enough to maintain that without friends that help support that.
No, you need to think intimately about how you create the environment and the mindset of which that comes easily. You shouldn't have to contort the very last of your willpower to have a slightly wise or calm-minded thought. You should have done things earlier in the day that are conditions to that, and also have a little accountability team. And obviously you guys are a peak example about that. Someone who's just going to remind you of what your best brain does when left to its own devices and to think wisely, versus who it might be when you're stressed or tired or aggravated or angry or whatever. Who's going to help you just come back to the moment, be nice and balanced and calm.
One of the big things that really winds me up about what the current world we live in is this idea of everyone has to be happy and positive all the time. And it's like so unauthentic, and also is really crushing to who we are. And so it's finding the balance between being honest and also not getting swamped in the negative stuff that actually drains us of our resources. So that's why I love what you're doing, because I think there's a huge element of honesty, authenticity, and reflection, and challenge in it as well.
I don't think people realize, like, I'm not about to voice this as an expert, but I think that Gabor Mate, is that a name?
Love him.
Yeah, like has written a lot and has talked a lot about the cost of that inauthenticity, particularly as it relates to the positive side. If you're pretending everything is positive or everything is fine, there's a kind of untold physical cost that you pay to doing that.
Yeah.
I've thought about that a lot myself, because I can sometimes be guilty of being a bit like, stoic or thoughtful, and sometimes I'm suppressing my instinctive reaction when I do that. So what I've learned to do, and referring to somebody else, Stephen Peters, who is a kind of sports psychologist, best known for his work with British cycling, he wrote a very good book called The Chimp Paradox.
Love that book. And
if there's one thing I retain from that, is I give myself license to let my chimp, run loose for a bit and then put him back, because I know that's, it's sort of fun to do. But also it's sort of like, I know it's healthy for me in the aggregate, and I'll say this to Mara sometimes, because my girlfriend can sometimes be a bit annoyed that I have these very kind of stoic reactions to things. And she's like, well, what's your real reaction? And I'm like, well, my stoic reaction is my real reaction. I've learned that that's a wise, thoughtful approach. But also I say, well, my chimp reaction was, oh, that person was an absolute knob for doing that, and, they were terrible, blah, 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 so I'll get it out of my system, even though I know it's not actually my truest thought, my most singular thought, but I know my chimp is always going to get to an emotional reaction first, and I shouldn't always suppress it and pretend like it wasn't a thing.
It's interesting. Have you heard of the new play at the National Theatre, Dear England?
No, I've been in
Gareth Southgate, right?
Okay, yeah. I think I might have seen that, but
who hasn't seen it, by the way? Gareth Southgate actually hasn't seen this, but it's I went to see it, and it's absolutely about what we're talking about. It's about the idea that for a long time the England team, were just going, and things were not working. And Southgate comes in and he gets in a psychologist. And suddenly the guys are encouraged to talk about who they are, about their feelings, about their backgrounds, about where they came from, and suddenly created a new thing. And it wasn't suddenly like they became super successful, but they were dealing with the fallout so much better. And so I was really excited to see it, because I think that it shows that there is a shift going on. There is a shift happening in the world, where the character of someone is far more important than the outcome, which we spoke about before, and also the idea that of Gabor Mate, not suppressing, and I know that there is probably a difference between men and women in this area. I can only speak as a woman, but I think it's really fascinating, and I think what you're doing, Rich, is actually offering a platform for people to be transparent about that stuff, which is really great and something really, really special.
I'm certainly trying, but like it's the football thought and the kind of Gareth Southgate time in England, analogy is pretty relevant, because he's clearly created a far more progressive, valuable culture and environment in the England team and its relationship with the media than has existed perhaps ever, but if they don't win or reach some new plateaus of success in some way, people just fob it off as another kind of, well, cheers, Gareth. We'll get in some foreign manager now who's going to help us win, And I think I've thought for a long time of true success is that marriage of human connection and positive kind of transcendent culture with the performance aspect to boot. And I often draw it, and I might even do some sick little edit to this as like a diamond, like a diamond. So if you're in charge of a team and everybody dislikes each other and you can't win or achieve your goal or purpose, then you should just quit. You are clearly a negative influence in this whole space. So that's at the bottom of the little diamond. And then just over here, it's actually not easy to point your pen at a camera. On here is the side where you're highly connected. You've got a great culture, everybody who loves each other and wants to play for each other, but you can't win. You can't find a way to achieve your objective in mind. And
like our five-a-side team, Rich.
Yeah, well, we we made a few finals. If it wasn't for that radical hailstorm that one time and us not having any boots on, you know, we might have been a bit better off. But
what
yeah,
is
like
medieval football, sorry.
you know, it was a little bit medieval. Yeah, so on this side of the diamond, you know, you'd cry because you were so connected, but you couldn't win, and you'd be so frustrated. On the other side of the diamond, is where you can win, but everybody hates each other. You're great at doing the performance piece, but the culture's not there. And personally, that would make me sick. That we've been so good at achieving the outcome, but there's no transcendent relationships, there's no loving connection, there's no nothing. But what that means is that at the top of the diamond is when you get both of those things to tick along together. That's true success in my mind, you know, in any kind of group setting. And I think people are way too obsessed with achieving just on the performance level, and way too easy to scoff at people who are great at the culture piece but can't make them win, you know. And I think if everybody knew that true success was the apex between those 2 points, you know, they would look at things slightly more contemplatively.
Honestly, me and Matt have been having this conversation a lot recently, because in teaching, what that looks like is you've got the idea of youth voice, right, which is really, really important, okay, and is something that we should be prioritizing. What does the young person want? What does the young person care about, right? And what are the more holistic elements that we can be improving upon to give them better experience and, you know, give them better joy in their education journey. But the other aspect of that on your diagram, on your diamond, is that, well, we need to have some success, right? And success looks like, in our culture right now, maybe to pass an exam but also just to produce quality, to produce excellence. And at the moment, me and Matt are in this battle where we think sometimes the youth voice is being prioritized, so much so that it's being used as an excuse for a lack of quality. And that's a huge problem. It's like, well, yeah, but I had youth voice. Yeah, but the quality is dreadful. That's not an excuse. But that's not an excuse for producing poor quality. It should be elevating what is already there, not suppressing quality. So, and we're talking about, like you say, finding the balance between those 2 things all the time.
Yeah, and it's really hard to try and achieve that point as one person. You know, really, really difficult. But you can certainly build a team where some people are really good at getting excellence out of people in a very traditional sense, and some people are brilliant at creating the environment. And, you know, and you hopefully have some kind of overriding kind of values or vision or purpose that helps people kind of really focus on, you know, playing those roles to achieve that end. You know, but it's possible. The idea that they're a zero-sum game, either you've got hyper-connected people who love each other and want to transcend the experience together, or you lose, or you win and everyone thinks everybody else is a twat. You know, it's not. You can max out on both of those things. It is possible.
Absolutely, and I think that as teachers and as human beings, that's the balance we need to meet, is the element of choice. And we talk about, in music education, we talk a lot about excellence, not perfectionism. There should be a standard held, and there should be something really good that comes from it. But it doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to have its worth. It needs to hold worth. Also, I think we do our children such a disservice when we're like, it doesn't really matter how it sounds. It does matter how it sounds. It really matters. Children are not stupid. They know when something's dreadful.
But it matters because it's to some degree a condition for perpetual enjoyment, you know.
Exactly.
Because if it constantly sounds naff, you know, you're wondering if you're progressing, you wonder if you're growing, you know.
And they've got to go home and practice on their own in a room and have the skills to be aware of
know what the standard is,
what to work on, what needs work, and how to work on that. And it's just blanket saying it's great is useless, you know.
No, I think it's so true. Particularly true of the violin, from what Matt has told me a million times. Not straightforward to make a nice sound at all. You know, you can plonk a piano key. I'm stealing Matt's wisdom now, but you can hit a key on a tuned piano and it's going to sound basically fine. You can't put a bow to a string on a violin and it will inherently sound good. You need great motor skills, great technique, and great practice to make even just a salient good sound.
Except I argue with you about that, because I think
Debate.
No, simply because I think, I agree with Matt, of course, and I agree with what you've just said. But we also understand that there is a huge, because of that's what we assume, right? We assume that the violin is really hard and therefore no child can make a nice sound early on. But when you take away all the complexity and you boil it down to what is a violin? It's just a resonant, it's a ringing string, right? And so but it's about how we teach that to students, and we say, this simple sound on a violin, this is what a resonant sound is, and this is what we want you to do when you use your bow, and you're just matching a very simple pizzicato sound, right? If you pluck the instrument, you get a resonant sound. That's all we're doing when we're playing, is we're extending that to the bow. And in teaching, but in everything we do, if we take away the kind of assumptions made about something and we boil it down to the very simple act of something, then we teach in a very different way. And then me and Matt always teach from the start that tone is something that a child can do in the first lesson. Producing good tone can happen in lesson 1, because good tone is simply the resonance of an instrument, which is just a simple pizzicato on the string. So what I'm saying is all about perception and assumptions and stripping that back, and making sure that we're not laying those onto the students we're working with. Yes, it's really hard. Yes, you can't do that for a while. No, you won't be able to make a nice sound for a while. It's really
I think you're
often the kids don't need any convincing. It's the guardians or other people in the room that are wondering, when are they going to do this, or what hard is on that instrument. That they're not sure, but if you can convince them of that resonance and quality of sound stuff, to focus on that rather than what the next piece is and how hard the piece is, then they're going to be able to make anything sound beautiful, from an open string to Twinkle Twinkle and onwards.
Well, I think you couldn't have been more right to mention this kind of broader assumptions piece, because again, I think it's something people don't do enough of. Acknowledge what assumptions are being made in a space, in a team, at a moment in time, because often you'll be fighting against them, or you'll be misdirected by them by not saying them out loud, being honest to them, and or killing them where necessary. Like, I've learned to do it a lot in my job, in kind of advertising, where people will say things as if they are insights, and I'll go, is that an assumption or an insight? And it's not trying to interrogate them or put them on the spot, but I want to know, because the information they're giving me is creating my own personal environment for success. So if they're telling me something is an insight when actually it's an assumption, and that assumption is wrong, then I'm going to do something that's less ultimately valuable or impactful. And it's actually a really good disarming question. You can't really ask too much, because the assumptions and insights on which you build a lesson plan or a vision for the year or whatever are the foundation. And you don't want that to be a foundation made of sand, that crumbles away with just the lightest interrogation or whatever. It's a really good, useful question for yourself or for any kind of team trying to achieve something.
I like that, insight or assumption.
Yeah,
an
insight.
Have someone that you talk to after a day's work, where when they say, "How was your day?" you don't say "fine." You tell them, not with tons of emotion, just like reflect on that work day, and then ask them to do the same, and you don't need to do anything else. Your brain will do the rest of the figuring out after that. But just saying some of those thoughts out loud, it's a bit like filling in a No Wasted Days, but to a human.
Absolutely.
And we do that fairly often, don't we, Rach?
I was going to say, you said with not loads of emotion, but mine is often like absolute sobs and giggles and everything in between. And yours is a bit way more straightforward and reined in. Mine's just an absolute shitstorm.
I'm normally on like a busy train. I'm like, yeah.
No, you just live much more on a plateau, and I live on like the depths of crazy all the time. So. I can't underestimate the value of questions. Like, that's why want to make it really clear that questions are
questions over answers every time.
Questions over answers every time. And I mean that when I'm teaching, I mean that when I'm with my colleagues, I mean that for myself. And also before working out or trying to understand better what happened in your day, is celebrate what worked. Like that is ultimately, and I think me and Matt have really got that nailed. It's like, we'll say, Matt, I think, if you don't mind me saying, but Matt never used to tell me the stuff that was working. He never used to say the stuff that was working. He would be the first one to say, I would like to do this better or that better. But now will absolutely freely send me things that are working so well, and celebrating those things way before going, well, it didn't work. And I think that that's really powerful, and celebrating with people you love and trust, and people that are not going to tear your self-assurance down or your confidence, but rather celebrate it and be there with you along for the ride, but also help pick up the pieces when it's not working so well. So it's finding people you trust.
It's unbelievably powerful. That little format of positive, negative, inside your control, outside your control I shared earlier, I've been using as kind of like a little debrief format with my team at work a lot. And one of the best parts of it is when they fill it out for themselves first, but then the times where I can look at their positive and in control column and come up with 2 or 3 other things that I thought they did actually do that they've not given themselves credit for. That's arguably the most, because suddenly, there's going to be some constructive thoughts to come, but they sit up in the seat, they take a deep breath. It's like the whole piece just relaxes a lot. And then you've got an open mind and an open heart to, okay, but we could have done X, Y, and Z, or whatever, the constructive piece.
But you know what? That's a really important point to kind of think about and kind of finish on, is that we, as well as being responsible for challenging ourselves to work out what's working, right? Challenging ourselves to consider what's working before we question what's not working. It's to find it in other people, because that's what makes the world go round in a better and faster way. Like some lady served me at the pharmacy, and in front of me there was this blind lady, and she spent like 20 minutes trying to help her, right? 20 minutes. And she was so patient and so wonderful. And the woman behind me said to me, oh, she's taken 20 minutes. And I said, this lady's struggling. I said, it's really great that this lady's helping her. Anyway, she got round to serving me, and I said, you're so good at your job. You're so good. And she was just like, thank you so much. I've only just started. And like you say, like suddenly everything posture changed. And she was just like, and I thought, yeah. And then that is, that will perpetuate something else, and so what I'm saying is it's our responsibility to do it to others.
It's descriptive praise. It's real praise based off things that are happening. And that's, earlier I talked about, that sort of fake, just general praise that just gets thrown around. It's just we need the useful, real stuff. And I think people struggle to take praise because it's often a mix of things that are not really real. And then sometimes people will say something that is really true, and you're not quite ready for it because you're so used to just being like, nah, it's not. You're just saying stuff, and it's hard to take. But I think descriptive praise is so important.